I call on the American scientific enterprise to mainstream UAP research and development. And to do that properly, I should first begin by assessing the current state of UAP research. There are a few brave individuals and organizations conducting such research, including Professor Avi Loeb through the Gallaudet Project at Harvard, Professor Diana Pasulka at UNCW, Drs. Gary Nolan and Peter Skafish at the Soul Foundation with Stanford University, Professor Jeffrey Kripal with the Archives of the Impossible at Rice University, and the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies. But these are by far the exception. For UAP research and scientific study is shunned by the American science community writ large. Even with dozens of credible former military witnesses coming forward, as well as legislative action from Congress in recent years, the stigma remains too great to jeopardize the reputation, promotion potential, and tenure of those in academia. To better understand this resistance, it might be useful for me to describe the state of climate science in this country, where the complete opposite is occurring. As a former administrator of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration with a PhD in oceanography, I have studied the changes occurring in our Earth system, and while they are indeed significant, and I am by no means a climate denier, climate change is far from the existential threat that the mainstream media and some in the science community claim it to be. A false narrative has been propagated that global warming caused by anthropogenic greenhouse gases is the cause of every severe weather event on any given day. This is mainly the result of a large number of scientific studies that employ extreme and implausible emission scenarios. Lacking the expertise to critically evaluate such studies, the average citizen has readily accepted such misinformation. Conflating every extreme weather event with climate change is imprecise, incomplete, and incorrect. The most glaring examples come around every hurricane season, for which satellite data over the 50 years shows there's been no trend upward or downward of these storms. The same goes for wildfires, where news coverage always links climate change to their occurrence, but wildfires have actually been increasing in this country. So even the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been unable to conclusively detect changes in extreme weather and climate event frequency and intensity. However, saying that we are not in fact in a climate crisis is heresy to the mainstream media and the global science community. This is the situation with UAP, but in reverse. Ample evidence, even congressional testimony, attests to the scientific validity of UAP. But the response by members of the scientific community has been either A, to bury their heads in the sand, or B, to make faceless mockery of the courageous contrarians like Professor Loeb who seek the truth. Why is this so? Well, the reason is partially due to overclassification and a deliberate, decades-long disinformation campaign by the U.S. Department of Defense and intelligence community. Unlike climate change, UAP and the non-human intelligence which control them very well could be an existential threat, as our moderator, Lou Elizondo, eloquently described in his book, aptly named Imminent. The scientific community needs to wake up to the reality of UAP, which represents the most monumental development since the Copernican Revolution. Consider the extraordinary report I received this weekend, when a former U.S. Navy SH-60 Seahawk helicopter crew chief, who was embarked on the carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in 2021, described to me his reporting on forward-looking infrared video of a metallic sphere at an altitude a few hundred feet above the ship, traveling along a linear trajectory horizontal to the sea surface before it accelerated into the horizon at an incredible speed, disappearing completely. Upon landing, he discussed this with some of the pilots and the other air crew before transferring the FLIR footage to the carrier's intelligence officer. Moreover, this was not an isolated event. For the Eisenhower Strike Group, during that deployment, saw many instances of UAP, primarily F-18s, frequently encountering them at high altitude. And this topic was widely discussed by the Air Wing during the entire deployment. And later, fellow aircrew members of this crew chief from another squadron deployed on board the USS Gerald R. Ford and shared similar experiences. The crew chief also informed me that the secret laptops in their ready room provided access to a shared drive where numerous UAP sightings on FLIR were archived. They stored these videos on a folder named Range Fowlers. You'd like that, Ryan. And his commanding officer and safety officer were aware of these incidents, but there was an unspoken understanding not to discuss them openly in the ready room. I have spoken to other sailors still in active duty, and their sightings of UAP have become so numerous that they are desensitized to the phenomenon. My point being that the Navy possesses a trove of video evidence and data regarding UAP, and I see no reason why FLIR footage of UAP and Navy training ranges could not be declassified and shared with the scientific community. With open access to more data like this, we could transform every institution of higher education by establishing a Gallaudet project within their astronomy and astrophysics departments, a Soul Foundation within their biomedicine and humanities programs, and an archive of the impossible in their religious studies and philosophy curricula. To close, I point out that last month at the Endless Frontiers Conference in Austin, the President's Science Advisor, Michael Pratsios, committed the Trump administration to creating a golden age in American innovation. I am convinced that UAP research can not only support this, but accelerate it in ways beyond our imagination. The time to destroy the stigma associated with UAP is now. I ask the House Oversight Committee and other members of Congress to demand the DoD, DOE, DHS, and NASA release more UAP data for open science. And I call on the White House to include UAP research in its 2025 R&D priorities memo. Thank you all.